It was late on a Friday night when we decided to leave. My dad had the idea earlier that week. Instead of waiting for the morning, we'd get a head start on our trip and drive through the night. The plan was simple: load up the car after dinner, pack some snacks, and make the 6-hour drive straight through until dawn. That way, we could reach the cabin by sunrise and have the whole weekend ahead of us. I remember the quiet excitement of it. My mom fussed over last-minute bags, double-checking the thermos of coffee and making sure the blankets were in the back seat. My sister was already half asleep, dragging her pillow with her, and I carried out the cooler while Dad locked up the house. Everything about it felt normal, even cozy. A family road trip. The streets were nearly empty when we pulled out of the neighborhood. The clock on the dashboard glowed just past 11. Streetlights flickered on corners, and shop windows were dark. For a while, we sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I watched as familiar landmarks blurred by: the gas station, the school, the grocery store, and then slowly gave way to stretches of highway. There's something strange about driving at night. The world shrinks to just what your headlights touch. Everything else, fields, forests, houses far back from the road, melts into blackness. I leaned against the window, watching how quickly it swallowed anything that wasn't caught in the beams. About half an hour in, we hit the open highway. Dad seemed relaxed, sipping coffee and fiddling with the radio, though most stations were just static that late. Mom sat beside him, occasionally checking the GPS on her phone, and my sister dozed off in the back next to me, curled under a blanket. I should have felt at ease, but something about the emptiness pressed on me. The highway stretched on, long and lonely. No cars behind us, none ahead. Just our headlights cutting through the dark. I told myself it was normal. After all, it was close to midnight. But it felt unnatural, as if we were the only ones moving through a deserted world. A little past midnight, we stopped at a small rest area off the highway. Just one of those pull-offs with a few vending machines, a restroom, and a couple of flickering lights. I stayed in the car while Mom took my sister inside. The lot was empty except for one truck parked at the far end, its cab dark. Dad got out to stretch his legs, and I remember the way the sound carried, the slam of his door, the crunch of gravel under his shoes, too loud against the silence. That was the first time I noticed it, how quiet everything was. No crickets, no wind in the trees, not even the faint sound of the highway. Just silence thick enough that every little noise felt wrong. I shifted in my seat, watching the shadows thrown by the overhead lights. My eyes kept drifting back to the truck. It hadn't moved since we arrived, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was inside, watching us. When Dad came back, I didn't say anything. I just wanted us to leave. We pulled out again. The rest stopped fading in the rearview mirror. For a while, nothing happened. Just the same stretch of road, mile after mile, until I started to relax again. Then my mom said something that made my stomach drop. "Did you see that?" she asked quietly, staring out her window. Dad glanced at her. "See what?" She hesitated. "By the trees, just now. It looked like, I don't know, a light?" I turned to look, but there was nothing, just blackness pressing against the glass. Dad shrugged it off. "Probably a house way back there." But there hadn't been any houses for miles. Mom didn't answer. She just kept staring out into the dark as we drove on, her hand tightening around the phone in her lap. And that's when I noticed something too. Far back along the road behind us, so distant it was barely more than a speck, a pair of headlights had appeared. For the first time that night, we weren't alone on the road. The headlights stayed behind us for a long time. At first, I didn't think much of it. Cars come and go on highways, but this one was different. It wasn't gaining on us, and it wasn't falling back either. It just kept the same distance, far enough that I couldn't make out the car itself, only those two bright circles hovering in the darkness. I kept glancing at the side mirror. Sometimes the road curved, and for a moment, the lights would vanish behind the trees, only to appear again a few seconds later, steady, unwavering. "Still there?" I asked, leaning forward. Dad gave a quick look in his mirror. "Yeah, probably another family on a trip like us." But I wasn't so sure. Something about the way the car followed felt intentional, too exact, like they were matching our speed on purpose. For a while, I tried to distract myself. My sister had shifted in her sleep, mumbling softly, and Mom was scrolling through her phone, the glow lighting up her face. But my eyes kept dragging back to the mirror. Always the same lights, always the same distance. About half an hour later, Dad pulled into another rest stop, a larger one this time, with a gas station, a diner, and a few cars parked out front. The sudden brightness of the place made me realize how tense I'd been. It felt like coming up for air. We parked by the pumps, and Dad went inside to pay while Mom took my sister to the restroom again. I stayed in the car, stretching my legs and watching the traffic pass on the highway. A couple of trucks roared by, shaking the air, but otherwise it was quiet. Then I saw it, the same car, pulling into the lot. It rolled in slowly, headlights washing over the pumps before it slid into a space near the edge of the lot. My stomach dropped. Even in the brighter lights, I still couldn't make out the driver. The windows looked tinted, and the car just sat there, engine humming softly like it was waiting. I locked eyes with the dark windshield, though I couldn't see who was inside. My hands felt clammy against my knees. When Dad came back, I tried to sound casual. "That car's been behind us for a while." He glanced over, then shrugged. "So, people drive the same routes, don't overthink it." But the thing was, I was overthinking it, and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he should too. We got back on the highway, and sure enough, a few minutes later, the same pair of headlights reappeared in the mirror. My mom noticed this time too. "That's strange," she murmured. "It's the same one, isn't it?" Dad tightened his grip on the wheel but kept his voice calm. "Coincidence." The night dragged on, the car still behind us. Sometimes another vehicle would pass, breaking the monotony, but within minutes it was always just us and them again. The longer it went on, the more suffocating it felt. Around 2 a.m, my sister stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. "Where are we?" she mumbled. "Still on the road, honey," Mom whispered. "Go back to sleep." But I couldn't sleep. None of us really could. Even Dad's calm was beginning to crack. He leaned forward over the wheel, shoulders stiff, eyes darting to the mirror every few minutes. Finally, he made a decision. "I'm going to test something." Without warning, he pressed harder on the gas. The engine groaned as we picked up speed, the car pulling steadily forward. For a moment, the headlights behind us grew smaller. Relief washed over me, until they sped up too. Not immediately, not enough to look obvious, but gradually, until they had regained the same exact distance again. Mom let out a shaky breath. "They're following us." Dad didn't answer. He just kept driving, jaw clenched. The next town was still miles away. Nothing but trees on either side of the road, no lights, no exits. The car stayed behind us like a shadow, never closer, never farther. I remember gripping the door handle, my heart pounding. Every time the road curved, I hoped maybe they'd take a different route, but each time, those two lights swung smoothly back into place, steady as ever. Finally, around 3 a.m, we reached a smaller exit that led into a rural road. Without saying anything, Dad took it, tires squealing slightly, as we veered off the main highway. The turn was sudden, sharp enough that no normal driver would follow, unless they were paying close attention. For the first time in hours, the headlights vanished. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "We lost them," I whispered. But Dad didn't look relieved. His eyes stayed fixed on the rearview mirror, scanning the dark road behind us. The rural road was narrower, with no streetlights, just endless trees pressing close on both sides. Our headlights reached only a few feet ahead, and the rest was swallowed by blackness. We drove in silence for several minutes, the car rattling softly over uneven pavement. Slowly, the tension began to ease. My sister drifted back to sleep. Mom rubbed her temples, and I tried to convince myself that maybe it really had been coincidence. And then, far behind us, through the winding trees, I saw them again. 2 headlights, flickering faintly at first, then steady, sliding back into place, as if they had never left. When the headlights reappeared behind us on that narrow rural road, it felt worse than before. On the highway, at least, there had been the excuse of traffic, the chance that maybe it was coincidence. But out here, in the middle of nowhere, there was no mistaking it. Whoever it was, they had followed us deliberately. My mom saw it too. She twisted in her seat, eyes wide, her voice tight. They're back. Dad didn't answer right away. His hands gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles were pale. "We'll stay on this road," he said finally, more to himself than to us. "See if they stick with us." We drove in silence, the tires humming over the rough pavement. Every few seconds, I glanced at the mirror. The lights never wavered. They matched our speed exactly. Never closer, never farther, just there. My sister stirred again, her voice groggy. "Why are we on a small road?" Mom forced a calm tone. "Just taking a shortcut, sweetie. Go back to sleep." But she didn't sleep. She sat up, hugging her blanket, peering nervously out the window. Even she could sense something was wrong. The rural road twisted and dipped, lined with thick woods on both sides. No houses, no gas stations, no sign of life at all. The kind of road you only took if you knew where you were going. The GPS had lost signal 10 minutes earlier, leaving us with only Dad's instinct and the faint hope that it would eventually lead back to a main route. Minutes stretched like hours. The air inside the car felt heavy. No one spoke, except the occasional sharp breath from Mom when she glanced back and saw the headlights still following. Then, for the first time, the car behind us changed position. It edged closer. At first, just a little, close enough that I could make out the faint outline of the vehicle. A dark sedan, low and ordinary, except for the way it loomed, headlights flaring in our mirrors. "Why are they getting closer?" I asked, my voice shaking. Dad didn't respond. He pressed the accelerator, and our car picked up speed, engine whining as it climbed toward 70, then 80. The sedan stayed right with us, headlights burning into the rear glass. The road narrowed even more, curving sharply between trees. Branches scraped the side of our car, and every turn felt like we might skid off the pavement. Still, the sedan stayed close, never overtaking, never falling back. Mom's voice cracked. "He's trying to scare us." Dad's jaw clenched. "He's going to regret it if he keeps pushing." But I could hear the edge in his voice, the anger barely covering fear. The sedan surged even closer, so near I thought I could feel the rumble of its engine. The lights flooded our car, blinding. My sister whimpered in the back seat, covering her face with the blanket. "Dad, do something!" I shouted, and then, just as suddenly, it fell back. The lights shrank, returning to the same steady distance as before, almost like whoever was driving wanted us to know they were in control. The silence inside our car was suffocating. No one moved, no one breathed too loudly. The only sound was the tires on pavement and the relentless hum of the engine behind us. We drove like that for another 20 minutes. Every bend in the road, every dip, they stayed right with us. The darkness outside felt endless. My phone showed no signal, just a dead blank icon where the bars should have been. Then we reached a split in the road. The pavement forked into two directions, one veering left, climbing into denser woods, the other sloping right toward what looked like low fields. The signs were old and rusted, impossible to read in the dark. Dad slowed, glancing quickly between the two paths. "Which way?" Mom checked her phone again. Nothing. "I don't know." Behind us, the sedan slowed too, waiting. The decision had to be made in seconds. Dad swore under his breath and jerked the wheel right. The tires squealed, and we shot down the slope, the car rocking over cracks and bumps. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe the sudden turn would throw them off. Maybe they'd keep going straight. But as soon as we leveled out, the headlights appeared again, swinging smoothly into view, following. I felt sick. No matter what we did, they stayed with us. Mom whispered, "This isn't random. They're hunting us." The road stretched ahead, long and empty, the fields on either side swallowed in black. No houses, no gas stations, no help, just the dark and those lights behind us. That's when Dad made a choice I'll never forget. "We're stopping," he said flatly. "What?" Mom's voice broke. "We can't keep running. They'll follow us all night. We need to know what they want." He eased off the gas. The car slowed, the engine growling lower. Behind us, the sedan slowed too, perfectly mirroring our movements. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Dad, don't!" But the car rolled to a stop on the side of the road. The gravel crunched beneath our tires. And then the sedan did the same, pulling over about 50 feet behind us. Its headlights stayed on, blazing into our rearview mirror, drowning everything in white. None of us moved. None of us spoke. We just sat there, trapped in that blinding glow, waiting for whatever came next. The headlights from the sedan poured into our car, so bright that the mirrors became useless. I could barely make out anything beyond that harsh glow. It was like staring into a spotlight. No one spoke for a long moment. The air inside felt suffocating, every breath shallow. My sister clutched Mom's arm, whispering, "What do they want? Why are they stopping too?" Dad didn't answer right away. His hands were still gripping the wheel, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell too quickly. Finally, he muttered, "Stay inside. Don't open the doors. Don't open the windows." We waited. Seconds stretched, each one louder than the last. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, the faint tick of the cooling engine. Then the sedan's engine cut off. The headlights stayed on, humming in the silence, but the low growl of the motor was gone. That somehow made it worse, like whoever was inside was now moving in silence. Mom whispered, Don't get out." But Dad had already unbuckled his seatbelt. "Dad!" I hissed, my voice breaking. He didn't look back. His eyes were locked on the mirror, on the blinding lights behind us. "If I sit here and do nothing, they'll just keep playing with us." The click of his door latch sounded deafening. He pushed it open, the interior light flaring for a second before the door shut again. Then he was outside, standing between our car and theirs, a dark silhouette against that blinding glare. We couldn't see him clearly, only his outline. He raised an arm, shielding his face from the lights, and called out, "Hey, what's your problem?" No answer. He took a step closer. "You've been following us all night. If you've got something to say it now." Still nothing. The silence was unbearable. Mom's breathing was shaky, her hand gripping mine so hard it hurt. My sister had buried her face in the blanket, whispering over and over, "Don't let anything happen." Then, movement. A car door creaked open, slow, deliberate. I squinted into the lights, but I couldn't see the figure at first, just a shadow shifting against the glow. Then a man stepped out, tall, lean, his outline sharp in the beams. He didn't shut the door behind him. He just stood there, motionless, facing my dad. Dad shouted again, "Why are you following us?" The man didn't answer. He didn't move. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of insects somewhere in the trees. Then, slowly, the man began to walk forward. Not fast, not threatening in the obvious sense. Just a steady, casual stride, one step after another, closing the distance. Dad stood his ground at first. "Stay back," he barked, but his voice wavered just slightly. The man didn't stop. By now, I could see a little more detail. His clothes were dark, plain. His face was shadowed, features hidden in the glare. But there was something about the way he moved, too calm, too certain, that made my stomach twist. When he was only a few steps away, Dad finally retreated. He stepped back toward our car, hand fumbling at the door handle. The man slowed, tilting his head slightly, like he was studying us. "Get in," Mom shouted. Her voice was high, panicked. Dad yanked the door open and slid inside, slamming it shut. "Lock the doors," he barked. We all did. The clicks sounded sharp in the silence. The man stopped just a few feet away from our car. He didn't touch it. He didn't knock. He just stood there, staring in through the windshield, his face still hidden in the flood of light behind him. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me not to blink, not to look away. Then, slowly, he lifted one hand and dragged his finger across the glass of the windshield. A long, deliberate line. The squeak of skin on glass was faint, but unmistakable. Mom gasped. My sister started to cry softly into her blanket. Dad slammed the car into gear. The tires screeched against gravel as we lurched forward. For a split second, the man's face flickered into view in the headlights. Sharp features, pale skin, eyes that didn't move even as the car jolted away. He didn't stumble, didn't flinch. He just turned calmly, watching as we sped off. We flew down the road, the car rattling, the engine roaring. No one spoke. My sister sobbed quietly, and Mom kept looking back even though there was nothing but darkness behind us now. But after a minute, just as I dared to believe we'd left him behind, headlights flared in the distance. He was following us again, and this time, the sedan was closer than ever. The headlights were back, closer now, brighter, flooding the inside of our car with harsh white light. Every bump in the road made them flare in the mirrors, stabbing at my eyes. My mom twisted in her seat, panic in her voice. "He's not stopping. He's not going to stop." Dad's face was set, jaw locked tight. "Hold on," he muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. The speedometer needle climbed past 80, then 90. The road was rough, narrow, curving between fields and patches of forest, but he didn't let up. The sedan stayed right behind us. Every turn, every swerve, it matched perfectly, like it was attached by an invisible rope. My sister sobbed into her blanket, her small body shaking. I tried to whisper that it was going to be okay, but my own voice cracked. I didn't believe it. The road stretched endlessly ahead. No signs, no towns, no exits, just blackness pressing in from all sides. The only lights in the world were ours and his. Then he started ramming us. The first hit was sudden, a violent jolt that threw me forward in my seatbelt. Metal groaned, the car swerved, and my mom screamed. "Hold on," Dad shouted, fighting the wheel. The car steadied, but a second later, another impact slammed into us from behind, harder this time. The tires screeched against the pavement, and for a split second, I thought we were going to spin out. "He's trying to push us off the road," Mom cried. The third hit was worse. My head snapped forward, pain shooting down my neck. The sound of crunching metal filled my ears, and I smelled something acrid, burnt rubber or oil. Dad wrestled the wheel, knuckles white, sweat dripping down his face. We couldn't take much more. Ahead, through the darkness, I spotted something, faint at first, then clearer. A gas station. "Look!" I shouted, pointing. "There's lights!" Dad saw it too. He floored the accelerator, the engine screaming as the car surged forward. The sedan rammed us again, as if sensing we were close to escape, but Dad didn't let go. The gas station grew larger, neon flickering weakly against the black sky. We flew into the lot, tires squealing, headlights swinging across the pumps in the empty spaces. Dad didn't stop at the edge. He drove straight up to the front of the small convenience store, pulling hard on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. For a moment, silence. Then we turned to look behind us. The sedan had pulled into the lot too. It idled at the far end, its headlights still on, aimed directly at us. No one got out. We sat frozen, waiting. My sister clutched Mom's arm, whispering, "Make him go away. Make him go away." Finally, the store's door opened. A man in a uniform, an overnight clerk, stepped out, holding a cigarette. He looked at us, then at the sedan across the lot. His brow furrowed. That's when the sedan's headlights blinked off. For the first time all night, we were in darkness without them. The engine revved, loud and sharp in the quiet. Then, without warning, the sedan peeled away, tires screaming as it shot back onto the road and disappeared into the night. Gone, just like that. The clerk stared after it, confused, then looked back at us. Dad stumbled out of the car, his voice shaking as he tried to explain, pointing at the road, the dents in our bumper, the gouges of metal where the sedan had rammed us. The clerk nodded slowly, already reaching for the phone. We called the police. They came about 20 minutes later, lights flashing against the pumps, their voices calm but their eyes sharp as they looked over our car. One of them asked Dad if he'd gotten the license plate, but in the chaos, none of us had seen it. All we could tell them was that it was a dark sedan, ordinary-looking, tinted windows, the kind of car you see 1,000 times a day. One officer muttered almost to himself, "This stretch of road, it happens sometimes." When Dad pressed him, he just shook his head and said we were lucky to have made it here. We stayed inside the gas station until dawn, too shaken to get back in the car. My sister finally fell asleep on Mom's lap. When the sun came up, the night felt almost like a dream. Except for the smashed rear bumper, the scrapes along the paint, the way every one of us jumped at the sound of an engine passing by. We finished the trip the next day in silence. None of us talked about what happened, not then, not for a long time. But sometimes, late at night, When I'm driving a dark road and I see a pair of headlights in my mirror, steady and unblinking, I feel the same tightness in my chest, the same cold sweat prickling my skin. Because I know that not all headlights belong to strangers just passing by. Some of them belong to the ones who follow. It was late December when we decided to take a short trip down to North Carolina to visit my mother's sister. My parents thought it would be better to leave at night since the highways would be clear, and my younger brother and I agreed. A 7-hour drive felt easier when the roads were empty and quiet. We packed the car just after dinner, snacks, blankets, and an extra pillow for the back seat. My father was at the wheel, steady as always, and my mother sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with her glasses low on her nose. I had taken the window seat in the back, while my brother leaned against the other side with his headphones in. The air outside was sharp and cold, our breaths fogging as we loaded up the car. I remember pulling my jacket tighter around me when I stepped out to toss a bag into the trunk. The neighborhood was hushed, most houses dark, with only the dull yellow of street lamps giving any light. We left around 10:30 p.m. The streets near our house were calm, not a single car passing us as we made our way to the main highway. I watched the suburban streets slide by, rows of darkened houses, mailboxes, and bare trees rattling in the winter air. My brother had already leaned his head against the glass, half asleep, and my mom whispered to my dad about directions. By the time we hit the interstate, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I'd expected. The sky stretched out, empty and starless, and the road ahead seemed to sink into darkness. Every now and then, another car would pass us, its headlights washing over the interior for a brief second before fading back into the black. But mostly, it was just us, alone. I remember checking the clock on the dashboard, 11:42 p.m. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the tires against the asphalt were hypnotic. I started to relax, my head resting against the seat, my eyes half closed. But then, something caught my attention. Up ahead, on the shoulder of the road, a figure stood in the darkness. At first, I thought it was just a broken-down driver waiting for help. But as we got closer, I realized they weren't near a car. They were just standing there, facing the road, completely still. The headlights swept over them for only a second before we passed, but that second was enough. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing what looked like a long, dark coat. His face, though, I couldn't make it out clearly. It wasn't hidden exactly, just indistinct, like the light didn't catch it properly. I thought my dad would mention it, maybe wonder what the man was doing out there so late. But he didn't. Neither did my mom. The car was silent. I almost spoke up, but something in me stopped. It felt wrong to say anything. I turned to look out the back window as we drove on. The figure was still there, now swallowed in darkness. He hadn't moved at all, just standing, watching the highway. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, just a traveler or someone out for a walk. But as the minutes passed, I couldn't stop replaying the image in my head, the stillness of that figure, the way the light didn't quite show his face. That was the first time I felt something pressing against me, a quiet unease that made the night seem heavier than before. And I didn't know then, it wouldn't be the last time we saw him. The road stretched on endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the black fields and bare trees on either side. My dad kept his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze locked on the white lines guiding us forward. The car's heater blew a steady stream of warm air, but it didn't stop the faint chill I felt running along my arms. I kept rubbing my hands together, telling myself it was just the cold and nothing more. After a while, I noticed how empty the highway seemed. For long stretches, we didn't pass a single car. It was just our headlights carving through the dark. Every so often, we'd see a green exit sign or a reflector post flashing by, but otherwise, the world felt deserted. I kept glancing at the clock. 12:36 a.m. We were barely 2 hours into the drive. My brother was asleep now, slouched against the door with his mouth half open, headphones slipping off one ear. My mother had dozed off too, her phone dim in her lap. It was just me awake in the back seat and my dad at the wheel. I tried to distract myself with my own phone, but the signal out here was spotty. No streaming, no messages coming through, just a dead gray screen every time I refreshed. I shoved it back into my pocket and stared out the window instead. That's when I saw it again. Far ahead, on the opposite side of the highway, another figure stood on the shoulder. Same tall, thin outline. Same long, dark coat. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, that it couldn't possibly be the same man. But as our headlights swept across the asphalt, I felt my stomach drop. He was facing the road again, perfectly still. I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on him as we passed. For a fraction of a second, the light hit his face, but it wasn't right. His skin looked pale, unnaturally pale, and his mouth was open just slightly, like he was frozen mid-breath. And then he was gone, swallowed by the dark as we moved past. My pulse quickened. I almost said something to my dad this time. The words were there, caught in my throat. But when I glanced at him, his face was blank, eyes ahead, like he hadn't seen a thing. The steady hum of the tires filled the silence. I sank back in my seat, telling myself it was coincidence. Just another traveler, just someone walking the roadside. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The unease grew heavier as the miles rolled by. I kept my eyes on the windows, half expecting, half dreading to see him again. My dad switched lanes now and then, his blinker clicking softly in the quiet. My brother stirred once, muttered something in his sleep, and then went still again. It must have been close to 1 a.m. when we reached a long, isolated stretch of road with no lights at all. No exits, no gas stations, just a tunnel of trees pressing in on both sides. My dad flicked the high beams on, and the forest came alive in sudden white light. Bare branches clawing at the air, long shadows darting across the ground. And then, just at the edge of the beams, I saw him again. This time, he wasn't standing by the opposite shoulder. He was on our side of the road, barely 3 feet from the asphalt, half hidden by the trees. My heart slammed against my chest. He wasn't just facing the road anymore. He was turned toward us, directly toward our car. I grabbed the back of my dad's seat. "Dad!" The word barely left my mouth before we flew past. For a second, I thought I saw his head move, like it tracked us as we sped by. My dad's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. His hands tightened on the wheel. "You saw that too?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed, muscles tight, and then finally he muttered, "Yeah." That was all he said, nothing more. But it was enough to confirm what I already knew. I wasn't imagining it, and whatever this man was, he wasn't just standing out there by chance. He was waiting. The silence in the car grew heavier after that. My mom stirred awake not long after, rubbing her eyes and glancing at the dashboard clock. She didn't notice the look on my dad's face, or the way I kept glancing nervously out the back window. My brother was still out cold, his breathing slow and even. I wanted to tell her, to explain what Dad and I had both seen. But when I opened my mouth, something stopped me. It felt like saying it out loud would make it worse, like acknowledging him gave him more power somehow. So instead, I just sat there, my fingers digging into the blanket on my lap, eyes darting between the highway ahead and the trees rushing by outside. We passed another 30 miles without incident. No sign of him. My mom had put on the radio low, some static-filled, and for a while, I almost let myself believe it was over. But then, around 1:47 a.m., I noticed the car behind us. It had appeared out of nowhere, its headlights sharp in the rear window. We hadn't seen another vehicle for almost half an hour, but suddenly, there it was, a dark SUV, staying just far enough back that I couldn't see who was driving. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another late-night traveler, but after 10 minutes, my stomach started to knot. The SUV wasn't passing us. It wasn't falling back either. It was just there, following. "Dad," I whispered, "that car's been behind us for a while." He glanced at the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. He didn't say anything, just pressed a little harder on the gas. The engine hummed louder, and the speedometer climbed. The SUV climbed with us. My mother noticed it then, too. "Why are they driving so close?" she asked, her voice tense. Dad didn't answer. He just switched lanes. So did the SUV. My chest tightened. I turned fully in my seat, staring out the back window. The headlights glared bright, almost blinding, but I swore I could make out a shadow in the driver's seat. Tall, thin, head tilted slightly, like he was watching us. No, I muttered under my breath. My heart started racing. Dad must have felt the same chill I did, because he suddenly took the next exit ramp without signaling. The tires screeched faintly as we curved onto a smaller road lined with woods. The SUV slowed for a moment, like it hadn't expected the turn. For a second, I thought maybe we'd shaken it, but then it followed. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. My dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Hold on," he said, his voice low, steady. The smaller road stretched ahead, dark and empty, only one lane each way. We sped down it, the branches on either side blurring into black streaks. Behind us, the SUV kept perfect pace, never closer, never farther. My brother woke then, groggy and confused. "What's happening?" "Go back to sleep," Dad snapped, sharper than usual. But my brother didn't go back to sleep. He sat up, eyes wide, turning to look out the rear window like I had. His face went pale. "Who's that?" No one answered him. The road curved again, and for just a second, the SUV drifted closer, its headlights illuminating more of the interior. That's when I saw it clearly. The driver's window was down, and the man inside, the same man we'd seen on the roadside, was sitting there, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually against the open window frame. His face was pale, his mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. His head tilted just slightly, like he was still studying us. My mom gasped and grabbed Dad's arm. My brother whispered, "No way," under his breath. And me? I couldn't look away, because for the first time I saw his lips move. I couldn't hear him over the sound of the engine, over the hum of tires and the rush of air, but I could see the words he mouthed. "I'm in the car." My throat went dry. I whipped around, eyes darting across the interior, back seat, floor, shadows between the seats, nothing, empty. But the moment I looked back out the window, the SUV was gone. Just gone. No lights, no trace. Like it had never been there at all. My dad's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. My mom whispered something under her breath, clutching the strap of her seatbelt. My brother pressed his back against the door, wide-eyed. And me? I just sat frozen, staring into the black road behind us. Because even though the SUV had vanished, the words he mouthed kept repeating in my head, over and over, until I could barely breathe. "I'm in the car." The SUV never came back. For miles, the road behind us was empty. The kind of emptiness that should have been a relief, but wasn't. My dad stayed quiet, jaw locked tight, while my mom whispered directions from her phone, her voice trembling every few words. My brother kept darting nervous glances at the rear window, then back at me, like he was checking if I'd seen the same thing. I had. I wished I hadn't. The words he mouthed, "I'm in the car," kept circling in my head, heavy and cold, making it impossible to breathe normally. Every time I blinked, I saw his pale face in that driver's window, that slight, unnatural tilt of his head. The heater was blowing too warm now, but I didn't dare move. I didn't dare take the blanket off my lap or shift in my seat. My eyes kept scanning the dark corners of the car, the footwell beneath my brother's legs, the narrow space between the back seat and the trunk cover. Every shadow seemed deeper than it should have been, every shape slightly wrong. At some point, Dad pulled into a rest stop. The small parking lot was deserted, lit only by 2 flickering lamps. There were no other cars, no trucks, nothing, just us. "We need a break," Dad said firmly, his voice clipped. "No," I blurted out. My voice cracked. Everyone turned to look at me, startled, but I shook my head hard. "Don't stop. Please, we can't stop." My mom touched my arm, her hand cold. "Sweetheart, we've been driving for hours." I yanked away before she could finish. "We can't stop." The words came out louder than I meant. They hung in the stale air of the car for a moment before Dad spoke again. 5 minutes, that's it." He turned off the engine. The headlights went out, and the silence that followed felt like it had weight. My brother climbed out first, stretching stiffly. My mom followed, fumbling with her coat. Dad stepped around to the trunk, pulling out a bottle of water. I stayed put. My fingers dug into the seat cushion, my chest tight. I couldn't leave the car. But then I felt it. The shift. Like the air in the car moved in a way it shouldn't have. a subtle pressure behind me, the faintest rustle of fabric where no one sat. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I might see. The back seat beside me was empty. My brother's blanket was crumpled, nothing more. The opposite seat, where he'd been sitting before, was vacant too. But in the middle, between our seats, in the narrow strip of space that should have been too small for anyone, there was an impression. The blanket had sunk, pressed down as if by weight. I froze, my throat closing up. The car door opened suddenly, and my brother leaned back inside. "You're not coming?" he asked. His voice was casual, but his eyes flicked to where I was staring. For just a split second, I saw the realization in his face. He saw it too. He didn't say a word, just closed the door slowly and backed away, like if he moved too fast, something might notice. I sat perfectly still. My breaths were short, shallow. The blanket didn't rise again, the impression didn't move, but it didn't fade either. Dad's voice cut through the air outside. "All right, let's go, back in." My mom slid into the passenger seat, Dad into the driver's, my brother into the far side of the back seat. None of them looked directly at me. None of them asked what I had seen. But I could feel it, the tension in their shoulders, the way my mom's hands gripped her purse too tightly, the way my brother leaned as far as possible against the door. Dad started the engine. The headlights flicked on, spilling light across the empty parking lot. But in the rearview mirror, just for a second, I thought I saw something else. A pale face. Right behind me. The car lurched forward onto the road again. My heart hammered so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. But no one said anything. We just kept driving, all of us locked in the same quiet terror, pretending not to notice that the space between us wasn't empty anymore. The car ate up the miles in silence. None of us spoke. Even my brother, who normally couldn't stay quiet for more than 10 minutes, kept his head turned toward the window, eyes fixed on the blur of trees and road signs rushing past. My mom's hand was clenched so tightly on her purse strap that her knuckles had gone white. I kept my gaze locked on the rearview mirror. I couldn't help it. Every time I blinked, I half expected to see that pale face again, watching from the back seat. Sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I swore I caught the faintest flicker of movement, like a shift in the shadows, a tilt of a head. But when I looked straight on, there was nothing. Just the three of us in the back. My brother pressed against his door, me stiff in the middle, and an emptiness that didn't feel empty at all. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed 2:58 a.m. We were somewhere deep in the countryside now, the kind of stretch where even gas stations were 20 miles apart. My dad's eyes stayed fixed on the road, his grip steady on the wheel, but I could tell he felt it too. Every time he glanced at the mirror, his jaw clenched just a little tighter. Then the radio cut on by itself. A burst of static filled the car, sharp and loud. My mom jumped, fumbling to shut it off, but the knob didn't respond. The static hissed and cracked, rising and falling like a broken voice trying to form words. "Turn it off," my mom whispered, panic in her tone. "I am," Dad snapped, twisting the dial harder. But the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, sharper, until beneath the static, a voice began to bleed through. Low, distorted, drawn out. "Still with you." The words were faint, but I heard them. We all did. My brother's eyes went wide. My mom covered her mouth. My dad smacked the side of the console, and finally the sound cut off. The radio went dead. Silence again. But this silence felt worse than the noise. The air in the car was heavy, suffocating. My skin prickled. I glanced sideways, and that's when I saw it, clearer than before. The blanket beside me was moving, not just sunken this time, moving, slowly, as if something unseen was shifting underneath, pressing up, almost crawling toward me. I gasped and shoved myself against my brother. He yelped, but when he looked down, he saw it too. The blanket bulged, the fabric stretching upward like invisible hands were pushing from beneath. My dad's voice broke through the panic. "Don't look at it." His eyes stayed glued to the road. His voice was steady, but too steady, forced. "Dad," my brother started. "Don't look at it," he barked. The blanket stilled, flattened, nothing there, but the air was colder now, sharp enough to sting my skin. And then, from directly behind us, inches from my ear, I heard it. A whisper. Closer now. I bolted upright, my hand slamming against the window. My brother's head whipped around, searching the back seat. My mom let out a broken sob, begging my dad to stop the car, but he didn't. He pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer climbing. The car rattled as we hit 90, then 95. My mom was crying, my brother was shouting, and I just sat frozen, the whisper still curling through my head. Then, ahead in the beams of our headlights, a shape appeared in the middle of the road. Tall, thin, perfectly still. It was him. My dad swore under his breath and yanked the wheel. The car swerved hard, tires screaming against the asphalt. My body slammed against the door. My mom screamed. For a split second, the headlights lit up the figure's face, and it wasn't blank anymore. He was smiling. Wide, unnatural. And then the car spun off the road. Branches slapped against the windows. Gravel roared under the tires. We skidded hard before finally jerking to a stop on the shoulder, the engine coughing but still running. No one moved, no one spoke. Just the sound of our ragged breathing and the faint tick of the cooling engine. I dared to look up. The road was empty. The figure was gone. My dad's hands shook on the wheel. My mom was whispering prayers under her breath. My brother clutched my arm so tight it hurt. No one said the obvious, that if Dad hadn't swerved, we would have hit him, that we would have hit something. We sat there for almost 20 minutes before Dad finally pulled back onto the road. No one spoke the rest of the drive. When we reached my aunt's house just before dawn, none of us unpacked, none of us slept. We sat in the living room with every light on, listening for sounds we couldn't name, waiting for daylight to make it feel less real. But even then, even in the daylight, none of us said it out loud. Because we all knew the truth. That man, whoever he was, whatever he was, hadn't just been on the road. He had been in the car. And maybe, just maybe, he still was.